What up, YouTube? Here with Talk Wrestling, episode number 3. On this episode, I'm going to be covering the latest news that's been headlining on the pro wrestling world. And it's been a lot going on in the wrestling world. Summer is always a busy time in the pro wrestling world. First things first, I'm going to be talking about the biggest news that hit pro wrestling as of late. And that was Vince McMahon officially announcing his retirement as the CEO of the WWE at age 77. Now, for as long as I've been alive, Vince McMahon's been the chairman, the CEO of the WWE. Ever since I discovered pro wrestling, Vince McMahon's been the face as far as the representative when it comes to the corporate world, when it comes to pro wrestling. And now to see him step down from his duties officially as the CEO of the WWE, it definitely shocked a lot of wrestling fans and even non-wrestling fans, because if you were a wrestling fan that used to watch wrestling, or you would tap in here and there, everybody knows who Vince McMahon is. That's the CEO, the boss man of the WWE. And for him to no longer have that title anymore, it's gonna make headlines in all of sports and entertainment media. And y'all know Vince McMahon, he stepped down I think a few months ago as the CEO of the WWE. He relinquished that position for a while the board of directors were looking at his misconduct behavior. I don't want to get into that because that's frankly, that's none of my business. And only those that's behind the scenes, the board of directors that was looking at Vince McMahon and whatever he have going on, only they know what's going on with that. Like, us fans can only go by what we hear, and it's all speculation when it comes to us wrestling fans talking about this situation that Vince was in, while the board of directors were looking at him if he's going to be a responsible CEO moving forward. Well, now they don't have to discuss that, talk about that anymore. That's no longer a topic. As far as the WWE and its future, Vince McMahon officially stepped down, relinquished his duties as the CEO, chairman of the WWE. Now this calls for a new age for not only the WWE, but pro wrestling period, because WWE is the biggest company when it comes to pro wrestling, undeniably. And this definitely shook up the world of pro wrestling. And as far as how the product is going to go with the WWE, we know now that Nick Khan is going to be co-CEO of the WWE along with his daughter Stephanie McMahon. Now we got two CEOs. Of course, WWE has its board of directors. I don't know as far as the whole politics go when it comes to the corporate part of the WWE, but as far as I know as a fan is that the WWE is a publicly traded company, so they got to please the investors. Now a lot of people are expecting that now Vince McMahon is no longer in charge of the WWE, that we're going to expect like a whole brand new WWE. Now, of course, it's going to be different. Vince is no longer going to be, around as the chairman or to influence WWE. Well, he got his daughter there, so I don't know if his bits and his, thought process when it comes to the business of pro wrestling rubbed off on Stephanie. But we'll see what happens when it comes to the WWE and its future. A lot of wrestling fans are thinking since Stephanie McMahon and Nick Khan is a CEO and Triple H now, it was announced that he's going to be continuing his duties as VP of talent relations. Now this is the next big news that shook up the pro wrestling world. Triple H is now going to be in charge of the creative writing when it comes to the WWE and its ongoing product. Now that's why a lot of people are expecting that now. Vince is out the way. They're expecting, like, y'all remember NXT in its heydays before NXT 2.0 and before AEW and NXT went on that Wednesday night ratings war. Like when Gargano, Ciampa, and Riddle, Seth Rollins, and all these guys that came up from the NXT, Shinsuke Nakamura, Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, the list goes on and on and on. Some of their best work was in NXT, and that's when Triple H was in charge of the creative writing over there in NXT, and that's when NXT was putting on its best matches, best storylines, just overall a great product that NXT was providing its wrestling fans. At some point in time, NXT, like back in like, I'd say from like 2016 all the way to like 2019, that's when NXT was considered, to a lot of wrestling fans that were tapping into the WWE product, they were saying NXT was the best brand when it came to overall wrestling. They were saying it was better than the main shows, Monday Night Raw and Friday Night SmackDown. And then now that Triple H is going to be ahead of creative in WWE, they're expecting product like that. And I don't want to say get your hopes up. I think, it's going to be ran a little different because Vince is no longer the CEO, but Nick Khan, I think, is going to hold on to a lot of Vince's ways, and Stephanie is Vince McMahon's daughter, so I do believe that some of Vince McMahon's influence is going to rub off on Stephanie McMahon. And as far as the creative goes, Triple H gotta be in agreement with all the members of the creative writing team with the WWE. And not only that, like I said, I don't know too much when it comes to the politics of the WWE, but it's a public traded company and they got to please its investors as well. And also, they can't only cater to one specific crowd. Triple H is in charge of all of the WWE's creative when it comes to the product going on right now in WWE and moving forward. So that means SmackDown, Raw, and I don't know as far as NXT goes. I think Shawn Michaels is in charge of how things are ran in NXT. But as far as Monday Night Raw, SmackDown, and all the other events ahead of NXT, Triple H is the head of creative there. And when it comes to the main product, not the developmental stages like the NXT, but when it comes to the main product of the WWE, they can't only specifically cater to hardcore pro wrestling fans. They gotta, please the masses and please all of its viewers. So they gotta really, balance this thing out when it comes to the creative side and the storylines of the WWE moving forward. So what I'm saying is, me as a wrestling fan, don't expect too much because that's gonna lead to disappointments. I say, wait and see. Wait and see how WWE is gonna do moving forward. It's only been a week since Vince McMahon relinquished his duties as the CEO of the WWE, and after SummerSlam, it'll probably be a whole brand new start when it comes to the WWE. Like I said, don't expect too much. Don't expect WWE to put on AEW independent circuit wrestling type matches, New Japan Pro Wrestling type matches. Don't expect that, or to make it comparable, don't even expect a NXT Golden Era type wrestling on Raw and SmackDown. That's what I say. Expect a little more edgy TV, and I think moving forward after SummerSlam, WWE's ratings are gonna be back to TV 14, and that's gonna call for more adult content, more edgier product, more compelling storylines. But as far as the wrestling goes, I think WWE is gonna keep the same style of wrestling, and I think it's gonna be less edgier than what you would see on AEW or GCW. You're not gonna see no Attitude Era, not even a Ruthless Aggression Era. It's gonna be, we gotta wait and see as wrestling fans. That's all I could say. Anyways, moving along to the next subject, and that is Riddle versus Seth Rollins. Their match at SummerSlam has officially been canceled because after the last episode of Monday Night Raw, where Seth Rollins, following the main event of Raw, which Riddle was a part of, he would go on and attack Riddle after that match, and he would hit the curb stomp on the steel steps, further enhancing their match for SummerSlam. But Riddle has suffered a concussion. Now, I don't know the official terms that the doctors gave Riddle. I don't know, but he's not clear to compete at SummerSlam. So that's a match that wrestling fans were looking forward to, but that's postponed now due to the fact that Riddle has suffered an injury. But it was announced that Seth Rollins will be wrestling at SummerSlam, much like at WrestleMania, probably versus a mystery opponent. Now, there's a lot of, rumors going on when it comes to pro wrestling, and, it's hyped announcements, whether it be a debuting superstar, a returning superstar, a potential matchup. There's going to be rumors all over the dirt sheet. And, a lot of people are saying since Triple H is a head of creative, he's in charge of WWE creative, they're expecting, Johnny Gargano or somebody of a Cody Rhodes caliber that's going to awe the crowd at SummerSlam as Seth Rollins' mystery opponent. Now, this, Seth Rollins, you got to give him credit for, pushing over talent, because, he's been doing that for these last few years. Seth Rollins has been putting over a lot of younger talent. He's playing that veteran role. Seth Rollins, AJ Styles, and I can't think of another wrestler that's been putting over younger talent. I could say Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn. Those guys been in the same position at pushing other up-and-coming talent. And I'll say talent that I don't want to, shit on other wrestlers, but those guys, names that I mentioned, a lot of wrestlers, even good wrestlers, are not on their caliber when it comes to doing their job. So you got to give Seth Rollins a lot of credit for putting over these up and coming wrestlers, and not having the ego to say, I'm not letting that guy go over me or anything like that. He makes the opponent of his look like a 5-star talent. He puts on some of the best matches in pro wrestling still to this day, and he has no problem at letting other guys go over and making it look good in the WWE right now. And I'm sure whoever that mystery opponent is, and it's rumored to be, it hasn't been officially announced on the SummerSlam card yet, but whoever it is, if it's Johnny Gargano, it would be monumentous. A lot of the hardcore wrestling fans, I don't want to use the word smart, because a lot of people find that terminology offensive or putting them down. But a lot of the long-time educated wrestling fans, if you want to put them on a higher caliber status, but let's say wrestling fans period, right? Those that are tapped in with the pro wrestling world, they're gonna appreciate if it's Johnny Gargano. And I don't know as far as what do you call those? I don't want to say basic wrestling fans, but those fans that appreciate wrestling, but that ain't tapped in, like pro wrestling ain't one of their passions type shit. Like those fans, they might not as be hyped as if it were to be like a John Cena wrestling Seth Rollins as the mystery opponent for SummerSlam. But that's like kind of like the same thing when Cody Rhodes made his return to the WWE at WrestleMania. Mostly it's pro wrestling fans, like real pro, like I don't even want to say the word real, I would say tapped in, passionate pro wrestling fans were the ones marking out and going crazy for Cody Rhodes. I say like those, I don't hybrid wrestling fans or like regular wrestling fans that were there like because it's WrestleMania and shit. Like I'm sure like they like knew who Cody Rhodes is, but they weren't marking out or anything like that, like how they would for superstars like Brock Lesnar, John Cena, and guys like that. Like y'all know what I'm talking about. Like y'all remember like the C Nation fans, like like that kind of fan base. Like they're not marking out for guys like Cody Rhodes, Johnny Gargano, Ciampa. They're marking out more for guys like Logan Paul and John Cena and guys like that, like bigger than life superstars like Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns and whatnot. Or it could be, they're saying Bray Wyatt could be the mystery opponent for Seth Rollins at SummerSlam. If y'all been tapping into Monday Night Raw as of late, there's been these vignettes teasing a debut of a superstar, and who else other than Bray Wyatt leaves them kind of vignettes? Like no other characters other than The Undertaker and Kane has like video promos and vignettes of that kind. So it's kind of obvious. I don't see no other superstar that could be behind those vignettes other than a Bray Wyatt. Now Bray Wyatt I think would get a bigger reaction than a Johnny Gargano if Bray Wyatt were to return at SummerSlam to face Seth Rollins. And they will pull off a good match now. They've had feuds before, past tense, Seth Rollins and Bray Wyatt. Their match were, I wasn't a big fan of their feud, but those two guys can work. I think Bray Wyatt, he's better at the creative side more than his in-ring ability, but he can still work. So those are two potential names I heard that could possibly be Seth Rollins' opponent, replacing Riddle momentarily for SummerSlam. Now, moving along, we're switching to AEW now. Jonathan Gresham, the former not AEW but former ROH World Champion, had asked Tony Khan for a release from his contract following his loss versus Claudio Castagnoli at ROH's Death Before Dishonor. Now he lost that world title to Castagnoli in a good match, and it was expected that Castagnoli would get that feel-good moment of winning his first world title at Death Before Dishonor. It happened. And I guess Jonathan Gresham wasn't pleased with the way he was booked. According to multiple sources, Jonathan Gresham feels that he was underappreciated and damn near disrespected by Tony Khan and the creative team over there at AEW, that he immediately, following his match versus Castagnoli, asked for his release, and it was heard that he cussed out Tony Khan backstage after that match. And yeah, Jonathan Gresham, he is a great technical wrestler, one of the best submission-based wrestlers currently active in the pro wrestling industry right now. And Jonathan Gresham had a lengthy run as the ROH World Champion. Before AEW bought out ROH, he was over there defending that title at Impact. After ROH closed down, a lot of its talent went over to Impact, and Jonathan Gresham was competing over there at Impact, and he would show up at pay-per-view events that ROH would throw here and there. And then at Supercard of Honor last spring, he defeated Bandito to become the undisputed ROH World Champion. And he's had like he's been champion for like, I don't know how long. Dude's been champion for like almost a year, so he's had a good lengthy run. But I guess, he wasn't pleased the way AEW was pleased with the way that AEW was booking him. Now, he made his AEW debut at the Battle of the Belts 2, defeating Dalton Castle, and then he suffered a injury, forcing him out of action for a while. Then, leading up to Death Before Dishonor, that's when he made his return to AEW TV, being featured on Rampage, which is, like their SmackDown. Well, SmackDown is now the higher rated show of than compared to Raw when it comes to WWE, but Dynamite is their main program, while Rampage is like their secondary show. So he's only been showcased over there at Rampage, and he recently turned heel, joining the Tully Blanchard Enterprises. Then he loses a title in his first defense while being ROH champion. When ROH is under the AEW banner. And with that being said, I guess, he wanted a lengthy run as the ROH World Champion, since he recently came back to the AEW TV programming, recently turned heel, so he thought he could have a great run as the ROH World Champion. But Casanoli, it makes more sense that Casanoli gets that feel-good moment of being world champion for the first time ever. Any other company he's competed in, whether it be ROH, WWE, AEW, he's never won the big one, and he finally did it at Death Before Dishonor. And Casanoli is on a hot streak. He made his debut at Forbidden Door, defeating Zack Sabre Jr., and then joining the Blackpool Combat Club. Been on a hot streak at AEW. They've been booking them right, and Blackpool Combat Club is one of the hottest groups going in pro wrestling right now. So it made all the sense that, Casanoli won that world title, because why shut down Blackpool Combat Club's momentous role? Now, Gresham could have still did his 1-2 along with the Tully Blanchard Enterprises, but I'm going to get into that part in a little bit. Gresham could have still, most likely, I'm speaking, in high hopes, most likely, like a lot of AEW's talent that could be used on its main programming, that get lost in the mix. Gresham probably would have got lost in that mix of, the fair amount of talent that AEW has, but, doesn't have the room to have these talent featured every week on Dynamite or even a Rampage. So he probably thought that, he was heading that Jay Lethal route, even though Jay Lethal has been featured more on AEW TV ever since he got into a feud with Samoa Joe and turned heel. But he probably thought that he would get in the mix of, guys like him, Pac, Andrade, the House of Black, and guys like that, that are very talented but don't get the spotlight on them as much. And with Tully Blanchard also being out of the AEW ROH roster, and him recently joining forces with Tully Blanchard, that also could have played a factor as well. Tully Blanchard is a legend. He's one of the original members of the Four Horsemen, and being under his tutelage along with all the other wrestlers that are a part of that group, with Tully Blanchard not showing up for Death Before Dishonor because he has his duties outside of pro wrestling. I think he's a ministry for a prison, and he's taken those duties more seriously than his duties over there at AEW and ROH, hence why he didn't show up to Death Before Dishonor. And I guess AEW moving forward were pushing the storyline of Prince Nana buying the Tully Blanchard Enterprise Group, and with him being the lead manager instead of Tully Blanchard. Now, of course, Jonathan Gresham could have stuck around and still did his thing with that group. Instead of being with Tully Blanchard, he's with Prince Nana and all the other same wrestlers that were a part of that same group. But I guess, he didn't like how AEW was treating him, and he asked for a release. And that's the news when it comes to AEW and ROH. And I'm going to speak on last night's AEW Dynamite, the Fight for the Fallen, and its main event. Bryan Danielson made his in-ring return, taking on Daniel Garcia. Now, they put on a hell of a match. It was a fun match that they put on at the main event of Dynamite last night, and it was a upset. Daniel Garcia picked up the win. Now, more times when it comes to pro wrestling, especially when it comes to big companies like WWE and AEW, and even I would say like any promotion when it comes to pro wrestling, like its returning big name usually wins the match. But last night on Dynamite, Daniel Garcia pulled off one of the biggest upsets in all of pro wrestling this year thus far by defeating Bryan Danielson, making him pass out while hitting him with the sharpshooter. Now, there was some interference involved in the match. Bryan Danielson looked like he had the match won in the bag, but from up under the ring, you see this unknown person distract Bryan Danielson by grabbing his ankle while Bryan Danielson was trying to get back in the ring, and that brought Daniel Garcia more time, and he hit the pile driver, locked on the sharpshooter. Bryan Danielson passed out, did not tap out, and that's like the cliche babyface defeat, having that will, that gut not to tap out, but to fight through the pain, but the pain was too much, so Bryan Danielson passed out. It was like the most, pro wrestling heel versus babyface finish, where the babyface fought all the way to the end, and this really pushes Daniel Garcia and Bryan Danielson during that match. I mean, Daniel Garcia is a very talented wrestler, and with Bryan Danielson taking that L versus him last night at Dynamite, that made Daniel Garcia look like $1 million, and this really puts Daniel Garcia at a higher caliber now. He's been, main eventing a lot more, being featured a lot more on TV ever since he joined the Jericho Appreciation Society, and he lost to Wheeler Yuta at Death Before Dishonor, but it wasn't like he tapped out or Wheeler Yuta hit his finisher and got a clear, decisive pin over him. Wheeler Yuta rolled him up and got the win to retain his ROH Pure title. And then he takes on Bryan Danielson, a returning Bryan Danielson, who's coming back from an injury following and after their Anarchy in the Arena match at Double or Nothing. And then he comes back. He's one of the most well-recognizable pro wrestlers in the world right now. Headlined WrestleMania before, world champion at wherever he went, except AEW, because he recently joined. AEW is still a brand new company, brand new wrestling promotion. And with that being said, Bryan Danielson is him pushing over. Remember when he debuted at AEW, he was babyface at first, and then he turned heel. He made Heyman and Adam Page look like $1 million during their world title match, putting Heyman and Page over. And now, in his returning match, he lets Daniel Garcia go over. Now, I don't know if they got a close relationship, Garcia and Bryan Danielson, but during the lead up to the Wheeler Yuta Daniel Garcia match, Daniel Garcia told Wheeler Yuta that Bryan Danielson, who's a part of the Blackpool Combat Club, the same group that Wheeler Yuta and Bryan Danielson is in, Daniel Garcia told Wheeler Yuta, look, like your group mate said that he wants to wrestle Daniel Garcia more than Wheeler Yuta, which is hinting that Bryan Danielson would prefer to work with Daniel Garcia, and that means he probably finds Daniel Garcia to be a better in-ring worker, better pro wrestler than Wheeler Yuta. Now both guys can go, each is their own, to each is their own. But last night on Dynamite, they put on a great match, and if y'all haven't seen it yet, y'all should go check it out. And yeah, like I said, they're behind Daniel Garcia, AEW and his creative team right now, because he was featured on a few main events, not only at Blood and Guts, but he had a one-on-one match with Jon Moxley a few months ago, main eventing a episode of Dynamite. And yeah, he's really showing off his abilities in the ring as of late right now, and yeah, the potential's high for that guy. And yeah, that's what I want to talk about as far as what AEW has going on. And Jon Moxley and Rush, y'all should go check out that match as well. They had a hell of a match. A opening contest for last night's episode of Dynamite, and then following that match, it was announced that Chris Jericho will take on Jon Moxley for the interim AEW World Title. I think August 10th or something like that, in some type of gimmick match. Like an AEW special gimmick match. I mean, we should have saw that coming, that, since Chris Jericho defeated Eddie Kingston in that barbed wire death match, and Blackpool Combat Club got involved along with JAS in that match on last week's episode of Dynamite. Y'all should have expected that the Blackpool Combat Club, Ortiz and Eddie Kingston and JAS were going to continue on their feud, and with Chris Jericho going over Eddie Kingston, naturally it would, as thinking pro wrestling fans, it would lead into a matchup for the world title between Jon Moxley, who's the face of the Blackpool Combat Club, and who's the face of JAS. I mean, it's named after him, Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho versus Jon Moxley. I mean, that's what makes the most sense. And I guess that's the next feud that they're going for. And then right now, currently speaking, that's the biggest feud that AEW can push right now. And I forgot to talk about this other subject in in the pro wrestling world right now. The other subject, now we switching back over to WWE, is the Maximum Male Model group led by Max Dupri, aka LA Knight. But now it was announced that Max Dupri will no longer be the lead manager, the mouthpiece for his founded group called Maximum Male Models. It's going to be led, I think, by, I don't know, are they kayfabing her to be Max Dupri's sister, Maxine Dupri? That's who's going to be in charge of leading and being the mouthpiece for the Maximum Male Models, Marseille and Mansoor. Now, LA Knight, aka Max Dupri, he's been praised for his duties on the mic, or I mean not his duties, I'm sorry, his ability on the mic. But the WWE sees no longer any, I don't know, potential for, to take on the duties of being the mouthpiece for the Maximum Male Models. That's what I wanted to say. And I heard that he's been rubbing off the locker room wrong. That's why the WWE, and before Vince McMahon relinquished his duties as the CEO of the WWE, he heard that, and I guess he isn't pleased that Max Dupri isn't getting along with everybody in the back, and that causes problems. That Max Dupri, who came up recently to the main roster, despite his abilities, his in-ring ability is good, and as well as his ability to talk, that's even better. But his abilities and his ability to perform good, being the new guy isn't going to be a good fit to, not get along with everybody in the back. And I guess, he came off arrogant or something like that. And and people in the back ain't liking his approach, I guess. So that's why they had replaced that role with Maxine Dupri, who was also a NXT talent. I forgot her name as whatever she was going by at NXT. But I don't know. From what I seen, she got the looks to fit in with that group. But I don't think she's on the level of a Max Dupri, LA Knight, whatever you want to call them, when it comes to taking on those duties, taking on that role. Like I said, they wouldn't have gave him that role as a manager if he wasn't well over with his ability to talk. But I don't know if he's not released of his contract, so he's still with the WWE. But I don't know if they're gonna have any other roles for Max Dupri to play in the WWE. I don't know if I don't know what they have in store for him. So with that being said, I don't know if there's anything to really look forward to. Obviously, Marseille, he was a part of the Retribution. Now that's a long gone group. That's a failed group. The Retribution, they had its hype during the beginning of last year, and they run was shot short. It was shut, and it was disastrous. It did not work at all, and all of its members, including its leader Mustafa Ali, who recently made his return to the WWE. Now where is he? Hopefully with Triple H being a head of creative, he gets a little more of a relevant role in the WWE. But all of its members despaired. Now they're like unheard of and unseen. And now Marseille got this makeover and joining the Maximum Male Models. He doesn't talk. All he does is do model shit. And same for Mansoor. Didn't see much of him. And yeah, they repackaged those guys, made them into playing a male model character. And now Max Dupri, I mean, those two guys, I've never heard them talk, never heard them cut a promo. And with Max Dupri not being the manager, I don't know how this group is gonna go. But yeah. Anyways, let me know what y'all opinions are on all the topics that I covered and discussed on this episode of Talk Wrestling. Comment, subscribe, share, like, all that good stuff. Y'all stay safe, stay healthy, and I'm out of here, y'all. Peace.